So to describe the field set element, it's basically an HTML element that you use in order to group together certain related elements. Like let's say you have a form and you want to group together like the portion where people answer questions about their contact information. So it would be like field set element, contact info, and then um, maybe you'd have like a part where you ask some questions about you know how the user feels or how the user thinks something, just something unrelated to the contact information, but on the form nonetheless. That's where you would use the field set element again. And what the field set element does is it serves the web for accessibility reasons and also for web crawlers. So better SEO, uh, better structured documents, which helps, you know, SEO. Okay, so now I'm going to explain the legend element. So the legend element is basically like a title for the field set. So you know how I said the field set allows you to group together different parts of your form. So each of those different parts may be like contact info. It might be, like a different section of the form. So the legend element allows you to say contact info. It's like a title for that uh, field set element. That's pretty much all it is. Okay, so now let's talk about the label element and the input element and how they work hand in hand. So the label element is what allows you to label an input in a form. So let's say you have a bar, and on top of that, you want to have like the word name on it, which is important, right? You want people to know what to fill out in the form. So you would use the label element for that. Now, you would put that right on top of an input element to label that input. That's why it's called label. And another thing that's worth noting is that if you take the label element and you use the for attribute within that element, and then you put in that attribute the ID of that input, what you can do is you can set it up so that whenever you click on the label, like the word name, it'll allow you to it'll automatically place your cursor inside of the of that input. So all you have to do is click on the label, and boom, now you're ready to type in that. Now you're ready to type in inside that input. So now let's talk about some input attributes that are very commonly used. The first one is the placeholder. And basically what the placeholder attribute does is it allows you to input some text inside of your input. It's usually like that light text that you'll see when you're looking at a form and you get to the email part, and it's like that little light text that shows an example of an email, and it'll say something like example@example.com, so you know what to put in. Then there's the required attribute, which you can also use for your input, which makes an element of the form required. So you can't submit the form without, say, putting in your email. The next one is the pattern attribute, which is used to supply regular expression patterns. So, in other words, it basically allows you to dictate what kind of letters or numbers go inside the input. So if you put like a phone number part, then the form won't be valid if you put in wording into the part that says phone number, because the pattern that you selected is 0 to 9, right? There we go. So then we have the type attribute, and this determines how the element looks and how its validation works. So for example, if you put type to email, the only way it'll be valid is if you have the little @ symbol. So that's basically a few notes on the different attributes you can use for the input element. So now let's talk about the select and option elements. So what those elements allow you to do is basically if you want to create, let's say, a question, you'll use the select element. And then let's say you want to have like three different options for that question to be all under one little bar that you click, and then it has all these options. It's like when you go on a website and it tells you or it asks you what country you're from, and you open up that little drop down and there's like all the different countries in there. Well, that's a perfect example of um, the select and options uh, elements. So now let's talk about the button element. So you can do a lot of stuff with it in JavaScript, but in HTML and CSS, um, in the example that I was looking at during this whole video, you can only really just use it to submit data or reset the form. So you can do that in HTML and CSS. I'm not exactly sure how, but I do know that you can do it, and it's done using the type attribute. So you would put type submit or type reset.